Hi everybody, and it's Danny for the news Cartridge for Friday, October 9th, 2015. The PC requirements for Fallout 4 is our top story of the day, and in my opinion, not too shabby. Bethesda has thankfully included the AMD, Intel, and Nvidia hardware across the board for both CPU and GPU. For minimum for CPU, they call for an Intel i5 2300 or an AMD Phenom 2 X4 945. 8 gigabytes of RAM, 30 gigs of disk space, and then a GTX 550 Ti 2 gigabyte or an AMD Radeon HD 7870 2 gigabyte. For recommended, they ask for an Intel i7 4790 or an AMD FX 9590. But if you get the 9590 or its younger brother, the 9370, make sure you get a motherboard that will support a 220 watt processor just like this one. Otherwise, you can end up with a fire on your hands, and that's just not good. I think an 8350 would just get the job done. Would get the job done just fine, and it's actually a lot easier to find a motherboard for that. Moving on. 8 gigabytes of RAM and 30 gigs of disk space, just like before, and a GTX 783 gigabyte or an AMD Radeon R9 290X 4 gigabyte. All in all, I'd say that's actually not too bad. Pretty reasonable hardware requests, especially the i5 2300. Recommending older hardware is actually a really good thing in my opinion because it's really not going to be that big of a difference in performance and it might actually save you some money. However, things are much different when it comes to the Battlefront. They're kind of ridiculous in terms of what they're asking for, as well as the availability of what they're asking for. For minimum, they recommend an i3 6300T, 8 gigabytes of RAM, 40 gigs of disk space, and a GTX 660, 2 gigabyte, or an AMD Radeon HD 7850 2 gigabyte. DirectX 11 and an online connection. Obviously, we need that. It's a multiplayer online game only. For recommended, EA recommend they ask for an i5 6600, 16 gigabytes of RAM, 40 gigs of disk space, just like before, but that's not going to change. A GTX 970 4 gig, or a R9 290 4 gig. Do they realize that the i3 6300T isn't even available yet? I mean, unless this is going to be available just before Battlefront releases, I still don't like that. I still don't like them recommending hardware that's so close to the game's launch date. Then there's the 970 versus the R9 290. To correct this, I think the R9 290X is actually going to perform closer to the 970. Finally, there's the 16 gigabytes of RAM. What? I mean, as you can see from my own gameplay here, the highest I saw my RAM go was 7.3 gigabytes, which is a lot, granted, but why not just ask for 12 gigabytes of RAM? I'm sure 8 would still be just fine on low settings, and mine are maxed out, even and them running recording software as well. By the way, when the game is running, it's running great. I was getting about 100 frames per second on my system, which really is a great place to be, except that it crashed 3 times in under an hour while I was streaming. So yeah, maybe you should get to that, work on that, EA. Stay tuned for more Battlefront coverage here on News Cartridge. The Call of Duty Black Ops 3 beta is now over, and apparently there are going to be some pretty big changes coming to the game. Nothing in terms of story because the game won't have one, but in terms of balance to the gameplay for multiplayer. Black Hat hacking will now take longer to steal a score streak and will give better indication that the hack is taking place. A limit to how much you flinch when you're aiming down sights when you're being shot from an enemy will also be implemented, because previously the effect was able to stack, so if you caught a player off guard, you could actually completely tie them up with very little they could do about it. There's an ability that allows players to revive called Rejack, which will now be changed so that if you revive a character that was previously on a score streak, it will reset their streak instead of allowing them to continue it and keep scoring after their initial death. Other things like indicators that you're hitting your enemy will be included, and see the description down below for a full list of changes, and let me know in the comments of what you thought of the Call of Duty Black Ops 3 beta. The 1.10 patch for The Witcher 3 Wild Hunt is currently live on Steam, but Martian Momont of CD Projekt Red has said just a few hours ago that the patch would be live on all platforms sometime today. The changelog is absolutely huge. 13 pages long, and they're boasting 600 plus changes, audio fixes, gameplay fixes, GUI fixes, performance enhancements, stability enhancements, quest and visual fixes. A link to the PDF file is in the description down below. It's rather impressive to see how much work they have put into the game after its release. Thank you, CD Projekt Red. Thank you so much for this wonderful game and for your continued work and your free DLC. You guys are a shining example of what a game developer should be and how they should treat their gamers. Finally today, a story that proves that gaming is more mainstream now than ever. BBC Three will be airing the League of Legends World Championship later this year. Dev Griffin and Julia Harding will be hosting the 4-day event, which you can watch online or by using BBC's Red Button service to take you straight to the coverage. Earlier this year, Cineplex Entertainment spent $15 million to buy movie theaters across Canada, with plans on showing esports tournaments at their theaters. This year, the prize pool totals $2.12 million, with $1 million going to the first place team. The quarterfinals are from October 15th to the 18th. The semifinals are on October 24th and 25th, and the finals are taking place on Halloween, October 31st. GG to all competing. That brings us to tomorrow's game releases, and there aren't any because it's Saturday. Thank you very much, everybody. This has been News Cartridge. I am Dandruff, and I will see you tomorrow. What's the difference between a computer virus and Windows? The virus rarely fails.